Well, we've only been doing holistic planned grazing for a couple of months now, really. So we're very new to it.
This is our second year mob grazing. We started last year. We've converted into organic. So it's just a way of looking to make the most of our ground, getting more goodness, more organic matter back into the ground.
For the past 2 years we've been trying 2 different types of grazing systems. First year we tried set stalking, which obviously didn't work very well in the organic system. We then tried last year a rotational system. We're in our first year of holistically managing the farm and trying out some mob grazing to see how we can work with land in a better way.
I farm at Chapman farm in Worcestershire in partnership with my father, and 5 or 6 years ago we started using holistic planned grazing. It's been really interesting. I mean, I think probably to start with he was very sceptical about what we were doing.
So having been raised on a set stock system where all the quality of grass is in its first phases of leaf, to then change to a system where we let the grass grow to this height before we graze it is a really difficult mindset to get ourselves into. I think farmers around here think that long grass is probably not a good idea, and we like long grass. Maximum photosynthetic action, maximum sunlight harvesting.
Some people think we're a bit nuts, and others are turning up really intrigued and really interested in what we're doing, so it's a complete mixed bag, but it's always been that way for us, so it's nothing unusual there.
Mob grazing basically is short duration, high density grazing with a long rest period. So by short duration it means the cattle are only on one block of land for a short time. They're at high density as well, so there's a large number of cattle on this small area of ground. They then move on to the next piece and it's then left to recover, so the cattle don't return to that piece of land for up to 60, 80, even 100 days depending on the time of year.
What we aim to do is to rest pasture for as long as possible, to give it the chance to recover so it doesn't deplete and become overgrazed.
Yeah, overgrazing, effectively that's what you're trying to avoid with mob grazing. So overgrazing is where cattle stay on a piece of land for too long. So you can't overgraze if you've got too many cattle on there but they're on there for a short period. Instead, it's when cattle are on a piece of land for a long period. The grass grows, the cattle come along and eat the grass plant. It then tries to regrow, but it uses root reserves, energy reserves stored in its root to regrow. And if that goes on for long enough, eventually it runs out of reserves and it dies. And that's why in a set stocked field, you'll start to see weeds encroaching. If you can let that grass plant recover, start to photosynthesize, replenish its root reserves, it can then handle being grazed off again, which is what happens under a mob grazed system.
When we walk down the pathway here, if you look closely at the pasture, there are rushes all over the place. Everybody in our team is trying to persuade me not to worry about it and just leave them be. I find that extremely hard to do, and I guess that's part of my conditioning as an arable farmer of the industrial kind. Like to see everything in straight rows and nice and tidy, and of course, nature isn't like that. Initially, mob grazing was being introduced as a means for transferring from our conventional system to organics. It enabled us to be able to extend our grazing season and feed our cows outside for longer, as we could no longer grow enough straw.
As I say, if we baled it and fed it in the winter time, what's the difference between that and feeding it now? And we might get along, even a month less of keeping the cows in the shed for the winter is a big difference to us.
But behind the fundamental decision maker behind everything is soil health, and the benefits of mob grazing were seen as a reason to give it a shot.
It's very effective. We've been into pastures today that have been rested for 40, 50, 60 days, and the grass is nearly up to your knees and it's very rich, and you can see that the cows and the sheep, they benefit from that sort of grass. They get fat really quick.
There are lots of benefits of mob grazing. I think the cattle health is one of them. I mean, the cattle perform really well under a mob grazing system. They're not eating very young forages that pass straight through them. they eat the seed heads, they eat the tips of the leaves, so they're getting a very balanced diet.
Everything that we're reading about, we're now actually seeing on the ground. So we're seeing the benefits of having those deep grass roots that are being able to reach far down into the soil to get it moisture.
There's also benefits for the soil, so you trample forage into the soil, onto the soil surface, and you get good root growth, so you get good organic matter levels building up in the soil, and organic matter levels tend to feed the soil population, it feeds the earthworms and the smaller soil microbes, which in turn release nutrients back to the grass to help it to grow.
So we have a mixture of grasses in here. We have things like cocksfoot, sweet vernal grass, we have some bent, we have some fescue, and then we have these little sort of bombs of wildflower goodness. And that's for a whole range of reasons. It's not just for biodiversity in general, it's so that animals can decide what it is that they want to eat on that day. So each plant will give an animal a different thing. If they have more to choose from, that's going to have more benefits for them, nutritional, health benefits, all sorts of things.
We've seen a massive improvement in the wildlife. Just grazing tall grass, there's a lot of biomass there. So we've got the small mammals, the voles go absolutely crazy. You just get huge numbers, and that leads on to things like the barn owls, the kestrels, but also the invertebrates, the beetles, the grasshoppers, the butterflies. They come in really quickly because they've got that resource, they've got pollen and nectar, there's plenty of cover for them, and I just think that's really good for the whole ecosystem and the local area.
Our challenge with all of this has been the water aspect.
The number one challenge for mob grazing is water supply, and when we grazed with set stock, we had just one trough in a large field. Cows would meander over and drink independently. Under the mob grazing system, we need to be able to get water exactly to where we need it.
We've got our own infrastructure to sort out on the croft, that's one aspect, but it's been getting that, adapting that mobile water situation into our flowered movement.
I have the cattle set up within a paddock, and I'll have them, there'll be a front fence and a back fence.
You control the cattle with electric fence, so they move from one block to the other.
So what we do with this is we hook one end onto the far end, far away fence, put the reel on here, drive along, put posts in as you go, then when we get to the end we just tighten this up. It's got a wee lock that holds it, put the wire around this wee loop, which then makes the metal bit of the reel live. Just hook that on the fence, that's the fence live. Simple.
And it's just taking a lot of time to practice setting up the fencing, knowing how big to make the paddocks, because we move our flood, the herd and flock, every day onto fresh grass.
I move them about every 2 days. Sometimes that can be every day or twice a day in really wet weather.
We never leave our animals anywhere for more than 2 days, possibly 3, depending on the sizes of the paddocks.
We found that we've had to change the paddock sizes according to the season and the grass growth.
And that changes all the time, either because of topography or because of physical barriers like the limestone stack out there. And
also different parts of our land will have different densities of grass as well, so we try and adapt according to where we are.
So at the moment these paddocks are 12 yards wide, and this paddock at the moment is roughly about 100 metres long.
At the minute we're in quite a sort of good grassy area, so our flood are in paddocks of about 20 by 25 metres. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's just enough, and they can move around, they've got enough space, especially the sheep can get out of the way of the of the hordes of the Highland cattle. But yeah, and I imagine we'll have to change that again once we move on.
But again, it just comes down, like tomorrow morning, if I think they've got too much grass, I'll leave them in there till lunchtime, before shifting them. It's just a bit of judgment.
It's very much an art rather than a science.
But the animals have taken to it really, really well. I mean, they learned so quickly what the routine was, and every morning now when we let them into the next paddock, they pretty much line up, and we just open up and call them, and they go through and start munching straight away.
The biggest motivation I have is I've got a picture up in the landing in my house. I walk out my bedroom every morning and see this picture. The picture's from 1971 when my grandfather was farming, and all the land was lush and green. The trees, which are just over there, they were thick, and you know there was woodland about the place. And walking about the farm nowadays, it's completely different. There's a lot of the trees have disappeared, the hedgerows have disappeared. The land last year especially there was a lot of bare soil. And we were really struggling to sort of get grass organically, so I'd like to sort of move away from the conventional style, move back to the way it was back then, and even better, and try and push that a bit harder.
There'll always be rushes, I guess, because it's quite wet here, but they won't be competing with the grass. You know, grass will be completely dominant, and that's actually happening now, I think. But I'm not brave enough to say, oh, well, just let it be. I know, get out of the way and let nature do its stuff. Because I think that's really what we've got to be doing.
It's nature. Nature is the most efficient, brilliant system. We will never beat it. So therefore we've just got to work with it.
But we also need to look at the family situation, the social situation, the people in the business, the financial performance and the environmental performance, and not leave any of those out.
Well, I think long term, holistic planned grazing makes your land a lot more resilient. So to make your land as healthy as possible, to build as much soil as possible, which then gives you healthy animals as well, and a healthy biodiversity in which we all live, I think that's probably the only way forward, really.
Just make a start. So even if you set stocks, create 2 paddocks, 4 paddocks, whatever it is, just increase your rotation. So you're just introducing some rest. If your stock are all in one area, then the rest of the farm's growing grass, hopefully.
It takes a bit of getting your head round, but actually the proof is in the pudding. When we analyse the results and we see what we're getting in terms of daily live weight gain, health of the livestock, and the health of the soil, that'll be what tells us whether it's worth feeding stalks or leaf.
It's definitely doable, but you've got to try it, and every farm's different, and you know, you're the expert on your own farm.